Okay, so here is baloney detection kit part 2. So in addition to teaching us what to do when evaluating a claim, any good baloney detection kit must also teach us what not to do. So in this part, we're going to talk about the most common and perilous fallacies of logic and rhetoric. There's 20 common fallacies that you should be aware of that marketers may commonly break to try to get you to buy their products. So the first one is called ad hominem. This is Latin for to the man. So these arguments tend to attack the arguer, but not the actual argument. So for example, I heard we can't trust the AstraZeneca vaccine because that company is aligned with the eugenics movement. Right? This argument has nothing to do with the actual vaccine. It is an argument about the company. So this is an example of an ad hominem attack because it's focusing on the company making the vaccine instead of the vaccine safety. So here is one example of an ad hominem attack. The next is the argument from authority. So when a person is making a claim is presented as an expert who should be trusted when his or her expertise is actually not in the area being discussed even. For example, here is an actual ad for Viceroys. This is from a long time ago, but you can see as your dentist, I would recommend Viceroys. Why is he selling cigarettes? That has nothing to do with dentistry. So while he is an expert in his own field, he's not an expert in cigarettes and the medical consequences to smoking cigarettes. So argument from authority, you always have to be careful about these. The third one is arguments from adverse consequences. So concluding that an idea or a proposition is true or false because the consequence of it being true or false are desirable or undesirable. So this fallacy lies in the fact that the desirability is not related to the truth value of the idea or the proposition. So in this example that is shown here, this used to be an advertisement that was commonly used by chiropractors. Some chiropractors appear to use the appeal of fear to promote this concept of subluxation awareness and encourage the use of chiropractic treatment, right? So they would come in here, circle an area on a spine and say, you really got to avoid this subluxation. And so if we do manipulation on the spine, we can help you avoid these problems and you won't have those back problems that can lead to death. However, there was no evidence that subluxations actually truly exist or can cause death or even disease within the human body. So this was kind of a made-up thing, right? And this made-up thing kind of stuck around because it was desirable to not have it, right? It's an undesirable thing and you want to avoid the silent killer, so the outcome is death, right? And so, oh, I want to avoid that. But even though that this thing is not really even a thing, this idea that it could kill you was the undesirability that made it so powerful for people getting treatment. The fourth is appeal to ignorance. So this is the claim that whatever has not been proved false must be true and vice versa. For example, I heard we don't know about the long-term side effects of the COVID-19 vaccine. This is an example of an appeal to ignorance because it focuses on what is not known. So because COVID-19 vaccines have not been used for years and years, there's this idea that is used to sow doubt by suggesting that we don't know what will happen years after getting vaccinated. So when addressing appeals to ignorance, it's important to focus on what we do know. In the case of our COVID-19 vaccines, we know that the vaccines are processed quickly. They do not remain in the body for an indeterminate amount of time. We also know that historically, when vaccines have caused severe adverse events, They have typically occurred within the first 2 months after vaccination. So millions of people have been vaccinated longer than 2 months ago without any incident to this point. So focusing on what is known instead of appealing to ignorance can change the way we think. The fifth is special pleading. So this is often used to try to rescue a proposition that's in deep rhetorical trouble. So for example, say you went to an integrative practitioner that provides you with some alternative therapy and notes that it works really well. However, you try it and it doesn't work for you. So you come back to the provider and say, hey, it didn't really work for me. And then your provider said, it didn't work for you because you were skeptical about the treatment. You have to fully believe in the treatment for it to work. This is an example of special pleading because the reason for you being the exception to the it works rule was not adequately justified. So the sixth one is begging the question or assuming the answer. So anytime you have a form of argument where the conclusion is assumed in one of the premises, you have this kind of begging the question. This is circular reasoning. So here's an example. Fruits and vegetables are part of a healthy diet. After all, a healthy eating plan includes fruits and vegetables. This didn't really say anything, right? It didn't tell you why fruits and vegetables are a healthy part of your diet, right? You got to dive in and talk about what's inside them that makes them healthy. What are they doing to the body, right? You can't just use this circular argument here that really tells you nothing. Observational selection is the seventh one. This is also called enumeration of favorable circumstances, or as the philosopher Francis Bacon described, counting the hits and forgetting the misses, right? So this is an example of observational selection, the belief that natural things are simply better for us. So there's plenty of examples where natural things are definitely not better for us. Mercury is a natural thing. It's also very, very pure, and it causes brain damage and causes us to go crazy if we have it in our systems. All natural, organic, gluten-free box jellyfish venom. So a lot of animals have venom, and these venom and toxins are very bad for us, but they are fully natural. And then opium, which comes from the poppy plants and causes addiction, right, is not safe. Okay? So observational selection, you have to be careful of this too. You also have to be careful of statistics when they're used to describe small numbers or examples. This is actually a close relative of observational selection. So this involves drawing conclusions based on very small sample size rather than looking at statistics that are much more in line with a typical or an average situation. So you could have the same counties selected here, and using small populations in these counties, you could call them the counties with the lowest rates of kidney cancer, and you could also count them as the counties with the highest rates of kidney cancer, saying that they're mostly rural, sparsely populated, located in traditionally Republican states in the Midwest, the South, and the West, right? And you could find locations where these things are true and you have these lowest rates of kidney cancer because your numbers are very low. You have small sample size when you're looking at these things. So you can see extreme outcomes that can be seen more often when you have statistics that are built on very small numbers where small sample size is occurring. So there's more variability rather than having a true average reading. You can also have misunderstandings about the nature of statistics. So, for example, President Dwight Eisenhower expressed astonishment and alarm on discovering that fully half of all Americans have below average intelligence, right? But average is right in the middle. So 50% are going to be lower and 50% are going to be higher. So this was just a misunderstanding of the nature of statistics. Number 10 is inconsistency. So this is where two distinct beliefs are both promoted but are inconsistent with one another. So for example, you want to prudently plan for the worst of which a potential military adversary is capable, but then you thriftily ignore the scientific projections on environmental dangers. So this is an inconsistency that we see when our government is deciding our budget and what's important to actually focus on. Number 11 is the non sequitur. This is Latin for it doesn't follow, and this occurs when the conclusion doesn't follow from the premises. So often those falling into the non sequitur fallacy have simply failed to recognize alternative possibilities. So here's a non sequitur. People died of cancer before cigarettes were invented, so smoking doesn't cause cancer, right? We know that's a non sequitur. Yes, people died of cancer before cigarettes, but they died more after cigarettes became a thing, and they died from lung cancer, which is still the leading cause of death from cancers caused by smoking. Number 12 is the post hoc ergo propter hoc. This is Latin for it happened after, so it was caused by. So several years ago, there was a huge push to say that vaccines caused autism in children. And this was because autism often will display itself about the same time when vaccinations are also given. So the thought was that my child was vaccinated. A week later, they started to have signs of autism. Therefore, the vaccine caused the autism. And this is a normal thing for us to think. This is a propensity of a human being to kind of think, oh, this happened, and then this happened, so this other thing must have caused that to happen, even when there's actually no correlative causation that's going on, that there's only correlation or the timing was about the same time, but it actually wasn't causative as the agent. So other studies have since been done showing that there's no increased risk from vaccination to getting autism. It's just that autism usually shows up in people that have it about the same time that they will get these vaccines. Number 13 is the meaningless question. So asking a question that doesn't have any rational meaning. What happens when an irresistible force meets an immovable object? But if there is such a thing as an irresistible force, then there can't be an immovable object, or vice versa, right? So that's a meaningless question. Creating a false dichotomy or having an excluded middle is number 14. So considering only the two extremes in a continuum of intermediate possibilities. Sure, take his side. My husband's perfect. I'm always wrong. Or either you love your country or you hate it, right? These are extremes in the argumentation or dichotomy, right? So there's a lot of middle ground that's being ignored or excluded from the conversation. Number 15 is the short term versus the long term. This is a subset of the excluded middle, so it comes from that one, but is very important. So this is why it's pulled out for special attention. So an example here of short-term versus long-term. We can't afford programs to feed malnourished children and educate preschool kids. We need to urgently deal with crime on the streets. Or why explore space or pursue fundamental science when we have such a huge budget deficit? Right? So the short term is outweighing the long-term benefits of the investment in this case. Number 16 is the slippery slope. This is also related to the excluded middle. So, for example, if we legalize marijuana now, then next they will legalize all other drugs, and then crime will increase, right? So this is a slippery slope. The argument here doesn't necessarily follow. Number 17 is confusion of the correlation and causation. So concluding that one thing caused another because they're often occurring together. So the tobacco company, for example, abused this fallacy to argue that simply because smoking was correlated with lung cancer deaths, that it wasn't the causative agent. It was just correlated, but not causative. However, we know now that it is the causative agent that is causing lung cancer. So this can be used in both ways, right? You can say, oh, these things are correlated, so it must be causative. Or you can say these things are just correlated and not causative, right? So sowing confusion around these without having backup data or the mechanism that links them together. Number 18 is the straw man. This happens when you have a caricaturing of a position to make it easier to attack. For example, the pharmaceutical industry is systematically sabotaging alternative medicine because it would lose substantial amounts of revenue if the true value of the alternative medicine were to become general knowledge. That peach pit or apricot pit in the other lecture, this would be a good example of maybe the straw man, right? So, oh, this actually cures cancer, but the pharmaceutical companies don't want you to know about it because everybody would just be cured if they did this, and then they would lose this revenue, right? So this would be the straw man. Number 19 is suppressed evidence or cherry picking, right? So these are half-truths or intentionally refraining from using known scientific evidence if it works against your position. This is cherry picking the data to support your position. So, for example, the coal, asbestos, nuclear fuel, and tobacco industries have knowingly suppressed evidence regarding the health hazards of their employees or the health hazards of their products or their industries. And number 20, weasel words. So this is the use of alternative words to get around constraints. This is commonly used in alternative medicine, so you have to be really careful of these weaselly words. Words like promotes, leading scientists agree, 4 out of 5 dentists recommend this. So there's a story on NPR Health News blog that says acupuncture may help with nasal allergies, right? So this is a weaselly word, may help, right? It hasn't been proven to do so. So you have to be careful of these, especially on dietary supplements. They get used a lot. You will probably see these on your project when you're working on them and looking at the advertisements for the products that you're choosing to research more thoroughly. And some of the products that you choose, they may have active ingredients that do have some effects that have been shown scientifically to have some benefit if you want to take them. But a lot of them do not have good scientific basis or evidence for their efficacy. So it'll be interesting to hear your talks and see what you guys find out. And so in conclusion, with our baloney toolkit, here's some final cautions. Like all tools, the baloney detection kit can be misused, applied out of context, or even employed as a rote alternative to thinking. So don't stop thinking, right? Apply this judiciously. It can make all the difference in the world. So you want to be able to evaluate not only other people's arguments, but your own arguments as well before we present them to others, right? So you want to be thinking critically all the time about everything, really. And so this is my scientific perspective as well. All right, and that is all the lectures for this week.